Okay, so this is quite the understatement, but there is a lot going on in Game of Thrones, especially what with the latest series running a Gendry-like mile a minute. As such, there's a ton of details that either get skimmed over or are hidden in the books as a subnote of an overheard conversation. Yet these moments can sometimes reveal huge details about the world of Westeros that quite honestly boggle the mind. With this in mind, I'm Jules, the one true heir, get it, because I'm bold, of the Throne of Games, and these are 10 facts about Westeros Game of Thrones won't tell you. Number 10. Humans aren't native to Westeros. Considering that the known history of Westeros spans tens of thousands of years, it makes sense that Game of Thrones won't dedicate all of its episodes to exploring it. As it turns out, however, the Dawn Age of Westeros was a fascinating time, as it was actually the first time that humans stepped foot on the continent. Yes, that's right, Westeros was originally only home to the race that we've seen briefly in Game of Thrones, the Children of the Forest. When they roamed the continent, it was a heavily wooded and sparsely populated place, with no weapons or technology of any sort. All that the Children of the Forest had was magic, but even that didn't help them when the First Men, a group of humans from Essos, first stumbled upon Westeros. But I'm sure that they were a friendly and kindly bunch though. Oh wait. Number 9. The First Men were brutal killers. On Game of Thrones, it's repeatedly mentioned that the Starks and the Wildlings are descendants from the First Men. This is a fact that is said proudly, as if the First Men were the rightful inhabitants of Westeros, while we know now, thanks to the previous fact, that this isn't the truth and that the First Men were actually from Essos. While the Starks and others might be proud of their heritage, that doesn't change the fact that when the First Men showed up on Westeros, they wanted the entire place to themselves. So they mowed down entire woodlands, destroying the homeland of the Children of the Forest, and went to war. The children tried to fight back with magic, even going so far as to break the landmass between Essos and Westeros so that no more humans could cross, but the First Men were relentless. The fighting carried on for centuries until a peace treaty was finally signed. Number 8. White Walkers took 2,000 years to get an army together. Thanks to the TV series, we now know that the Children of the Forest created the White Walkers while they were still at war with the First Men. They tell old Bran flakes here that we were being slaughtered, our sacred trees were being cut down, we needed to defend ourselves. But something doesn't add up with this timeline, and it's the fact that the Long Night, the time when the White Walkers first rose up and had to be defeated by the Children and the First Men, didn't happen until 2,000 years after the peace treaty was signed. So what gives? If the Children of the Forest really created the White Walkers to defend against the First Men, then why did they only come around 2 millennia after the fight ended? The only possible explanation to this question is that the Children of the Forest lost control of their greatest weapon, and the White Walkers set out into the north on their own. From there, they slowly made whites, created new walkers, and finally, after thousands of years, were ready to attack. Number 7. Westeros is set on an alternative reality Earth. There's nothing that fans in comment threads love debating more than the fictional map of Westeros. After all, the entire Game of Thrones opening is dedicated to this map. So while we know roughly where the known world is and how Westeros fits into it, what we don't actually know is what planet Westeros is on. Do planets even exist in the Game of Thrones world? Well, the answer, according to George R.R. Martin, is a resounding yes. But the reason we don't hear about other planets is also resounding. It's that no one in Westeros actually cares. George R.R. Martin has gone on the record explaining that Westeros is actually a part of Earth. But according to Martin, it's not our Earth. If you wanted to do a science fiction approach, you could call it an alternate world, but that sounds too science fictional. Number 6. Westeros isn't the only continent to have had the Long Night. The Long Night is a central driving conflict throughout the entirety of Game of Thrones. The thing that the show never discusses, however, is just exactly what winter or the Long Night would look like elsewhere. The answer is, it still wouldn't look very good at all. When the White Walkers came the first time, the entire world was nearly driven to the point of extinction, as every single continent froze over and had to rise up to defeat the White Walkers in the battle for the Dawn. That's how the Wall and the Night's Watch got their start, not to mention other methods of defense in other parts of the world. Black stone citadels that rose 300 feet higher than even the Wall, which must have been a truly impressive and quite foreboding sight. Number 5. The Andals imposed their religion on most of Westeros. The Andals were a group of people that saw 7 gods appear on a hill and decided to start the Faith of the Seven. Then, as has often been the case in history when a new religion emerges, they hopped over the narrow sea to Westeros and began slaughtering anyone who wouldn't convert. They quickly stole lands and killed off many of the First Men or the Children of the Forest that got in their way. But whereas the First Men simply wanted dominion over the land, the Andals wanted control of everything. So they burned down Weirwoods, killed almost all of the remaining children, and converted most of Westeros to the Faith. The notable exception, of course, course, is the North, which time and time again thwarted attacks from the Andals. When we first meet the Starks in Game of Thrones, we know they follow the old gods, but we don't really know why. But this knowledge of the North refusing to bow to other religions gives us the reason and further exemplifies House Stark's strength. Number 4. There's a people in the North called the CRANNOGMEN. Before you think that it's all noble houses uniting under the barking banner of the Starks, there's actually another group of misfits who fall under their dominion. The CRANNOGMEN are effectively swamp people who live in the marshes of Neck in floating huts and hovels. They're smaller than most men, which we can actually see in the show in the form of Jojen and Mira, who are, themselves, CRANNOGMEN. The swamp folk are rarely trusted by the other houses in the North because of their love of poison-tipped weapons and their maze-like living conditions. Number 3. Unicorns, lizard lions, and ice spiders exist. Book fans often criticize Game of Thrones for taking a lot of the more heavy fantasy aspects out of the series. But we've given you dragons, cries HBO. What more do you want? Unicorns, lizard lions, and ice spiders for a start. So let's begin with the weirdest one, the lizard lion, which is effectively a massive reptile that lives in the bogs of the Neck. Resembling decaying logs floating in the water, their teeth are like daggers, and they can be found on the sigil of House Reed. There's even ancient songs about the Marsh Kings riding on lizard lions to wartime victory. Unicorns have also been ridden into battle in the past, and several houses have featured their heads as sigils. And the ice spiders, well, that's what the show could have used as mounts for the White Walkers, which would have been utterly terrifying. Number 2. The Mad King actually had goals. When Game of Thrones mentions the Mad King, it's often to discuss how mad he actually was. But what else do we really know about the last Targaryen king? Why was he so mad, and what did he actually want? Whatever the reason, we can actually see that he did have plans in motion. For a start, he wanted to build a new wall 100 miles north of the original and take all the lands in between. He also wanted to make a new capital by replacing all of King's Landing. There was no real reason for this other than to show his dominance and wealth, which he didn't actually have, seeing as he owed the Iron Bank a ton, which actually led him to wage war on Braavos so he wouldn't have to pay them back. And number 1, there may have been a third race. Now, there's a fantastic companion book written by George R.R. Martin, Elio Garcia, and Linda Antonson called The World of Ice and Fire. It deals with all the history and facts that are too complex to be seen in the show or read about in the books. It also has an interesting side note printed at the bottom of one of its pages. After detailing the children of the forest and the first men, The World of Ice and Fire dedicates a small segment to a potential third race of people that could have inhabited Westeros early on in prehistory. According to an old Ironborn legend, when the first men arrived on the Iron Islands, they found the famous sea stone chair. The only problem with the black stone throne carved into the shape of a kraken was that the islands were completely uninhabited. What this points to, according to Maester Kurth in his compilation of Iron Island legends, is that the island had inhabitants even before the first men. Where did these early throne-building inhabitants come from? Well, the speculation on behalf of the Ironborn all points to visitors from across the Sunset Sea, a place that hasn't even been explored by any known Westerosi. And that's our list. I hope this gives you some more Game of Thrones facts to whet your weapons with, and let me know what you thought about them in the comments section below. Follow us on Twitter, head back to whatculture.com for more articles like this, and as always, I've been Jules, you've been awesome, and I'll speak to you soon.